In today's video, we're going to talk about how to set up your warehouse min-max batch and how you can configure this to do additional calculations in the legendary setup. So your warehouse min-max is how you set your stock levels, your minimums and your maximums per material per warehouse. And you can see your counted quantity, demand, and quantity needed. Within a warehouse min-max record, you can of course see your material, warehouse that's been defined, your preset mins and max, and you can also see some calculation metrics here as well. When it was last updated, what quantity we have on demand, how much has been accounted for, and so what our need is in order to get up to our minimum threshold. We can also set this to get up to our maximum threshold. And the need for this one is 2 in order to get to 5, because we have a demand of 1, which will then put us at 3. And so in order to get up to 5, we need 2 additionals. We can also see what makes up these values here. So we can see our demand quantity is made up of our holds that have been requested. We can also see that our accounted is made up of our inventory quantity available and our inbound quantity. We also have additional information that we can see down here, which are just informational metrics that you can use in reporting. In order to set your batch to run, what the batch is doing is it's running over and it's checking this recalculate button, which will then set your timestamp, and it will recalculate these calculations to make sure they're all up to date. Is you would go into legendary setup, so your tab of legendary setup, go to warehouse min-max settings, and you can click edit. From here, this is going to load our settings, and we can go down here, and I'm just going to skip to the bottom real quick to answer the question about the batch. Is you can go down here to batch details. You can set your frequency in hours. I have this set to run every half hour. Truthfully, I probably only need this to run a few times a day, so maybe I set it to every 4 hours or even once a day. I can set my batch group size, so how many records to run over at once. If you have relatively low or quantities of inventory as far as the number of records being aggregated in a given run that would meet these criteria, you could set this much higher, and then the batch would run much faster. If you have larger volumes of records, then you may want to set a lower batch group size. And then you can set your batch criteria here, in which case we have set to pretty much run just over everything, because every warehouse min-max record is going to have a material and it's going to have a warehouse defined. And then you can check the batch status here, and I can see when this is scheduled to begin running. If this was not scheduled, this would also give me the option to schedule the batch, and then it will schedule it to run within the 2 minutes after scheduling. So this is how I would enable and check my batch status. Now let's walk through kind of the rest of the settings, kind of just from top to bottom here real quick. You can set your any quantity needed that falls below 0, because let's say you have more than enough, and so your needed quantity for whatever reason would fall into a negative category. This setting is just going to set that to 0 if the value ever falls below 0. Now here you can set your accounted values. So this is where I can see that my MRP, the field MRP inbound quantity and MRP quantity available are going to be summed in order to calculate my accounted quantity. And MRP stands for material resource planning. I can also go down here and see my demand values. So my MRP inventory hold quantity is going to be aggregated with my MRP warehouse hold quantity to get to my demand. I could also go in here and add additional fields. Let's say I have another field that I want to use to go into my accounted values. Maybe I want to account the quantity of anything that's in a current build status. Maybe I'm assembling items, and anything that's currently in build of that particular item, I want to add to this as well. Well, I could go in here and select the field that will represent that value, and then that would also go into my aggregation for my accounted values. In order for that to work, I would need to create a custom field on the warehouse min-max object in order to set that value. And then these aggregates here are what's going to then set those values. So for example, in my MRP quantity available, I can see here that I am querying my inventory object. I'm aggregating the quantity total in this case, and I have my material field set to the material name and my warehouse field set to warehouse. Anything that's null, meaning any items in this case that do not have a warehouse defined, would get set to the default warehouse. Then I'm also going to query anything where the available checkbox is equal to true. And then similarly for inbound, I'm going to query all the physical receipts. And I'm going to aggregate the field quantity outstanding. My material field will be the material expected, and my warehouse will be the physical receipt address warehouse. So in this case, the inbound address of that physical receipt would need to be going to a physical address associated to a warehouse. Otherwise, again, this would group any null values to the default warehouse. If you don't want that to happen, just simply uncheck this, and then that would not group to the default warehouse. And then again, in this case, I'm going to query everything that is not equal to canceled or closed, and the type contains stock. So I don't want to include field orders in my inbound quantity, and I don't want to include drop ship sales. I only want to include the items that are coming into my stock that would then make up my accounted values. And then so on from here. This is how we aggregate all of the other values. I can query any object that I have permissions to access in the system. And that is worth calling out because the user that you want setting this up, and in particular the user who would be running the batch, needs to be an admin that has access to anything that is being queried or aggregated here in order to meet the permissions required in order to find those aggregates. So similarly, if I wanted to add another custom field, I could go in here and I could select a custom field, and I could go in and I'll just do this placeholder. We won't save it, but I could add a new field here. I could then go query a different object. I could, let's just say I want to do inventory again. And I want to select even inventory that meets a different criteria. I could go in here and do that, or talking about our example earlier, what I might go in down here and do is I'm going to do a technical order, and I'm going to query all the technical orders in progress that are of types build. So I could go in here, and I'm going to query this where it's the material fields, and this does have to be our material reference. I'll do it. Excuse me, let me make sure here. Oh no, this is our aggregate field, excuse me. So I could go in here and do my inventory, and let's go ahead and do the quantity total here that's currently being billed. I'm going to do my material field on the technical order. I could also do the material field on the inventory. Those two should be the same. And I'm going to go in here and select my warehouse field that is on the inventory. As you can see here, I'm doing this one off technical orders. I could also do it based off of the inventory in a particular status or stage for repair or build, and that would work as well. Then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to select everything where the type is a build. So I'm going to go in here and do type equals build. And I'll sort by just, this really doesn't matter, but it is required. So I'll do my technical order name. That's fine. And I'll set these to pretty high values. And of course I want to do where my record status is equal to, in this case I'm just going to do in progress. I don't want anything that's open or scheduled. I just want the in progress orders. And now this would aggregate, and I would of course create my new field here that I would call, active build quantity or something to that effect. And then I could make that a part of my accounted, if that makes sense for my planning exercise. And so this is a quick overview on warehouse min-max settings, how to schedule the batch, and how to configure any new warehouse min-max fields that need to be considered in your stock planning calculations. Thank you very much.